People keep asking me about this one, so I guess I better do a video on it. I'm gonna step into this minefield already. People love to hate the strong female character, but somebody loves her for sure, or she wouldn't be absolutely everywhere. What is she? What is the strong female character exactly? I feel like the story begins particularly in the late 70s through the 90s. You know, thinking back on the media that I grew up with, this was when this girl started to first come to power. There started to be a lot of the like girls that were like a rebellion against the like Disney princess and other kind of stereotypical representations of women that had been in media up until that point. We started to see a lot of like princesses who don't like princess stuff and girls who can use a sword as well as a guy. We started to see a lot of that. And I totally understand why this backlash occurred, why there was a hunger to see women being more, not being so much in the role of the damsel in distress, but instead being more in the role of what would have been the man rescuing her. Now she's taking on that role, which means doing the things the man was doing in the past. Wielding the sword and shield, or powerful magic, rebelling against like domestic pursuits and the expectations that she would just get married. In action movies that didn't maybe have a fantastical component, you start to see more women being like tough, having more, aggressive banter with the man, knowing how to use a gun, things like that. That started to really rise at that point. And we still have this girl to this day. Now she's become a trope. And a lot of the complaints about her seem to center on the fact that she doesn't always have a lot of personality. Her whole personality often seems to be, I'm strong, I don't do girl stuff, I do stuff that guys do, I'm tough. She doesn't seem to go through much of a growth arc because she already starts out so tough to begin with. It's like she's just in that sort of static position that a male action hero might have been in the past. Now, the lady gets to do that. Like, as psychologically exciting as a block of wood, but she can kick ass. If it's a romance, we often get enemies to lovers with a lot of banter between them and things like, the tropes like she pressed a knife to his throat and says, I hate you, and then they kiss. I think there's slightly different versions of this girl in like mainstream TV and movies versus like romantasy books. Like these are the two that pop up the most, is like the romantasy version where she's often very tough, has a somewhat antagonistic but smoking hot relationship with the male lead, and she often has some kind of trauma but doesn't have a ton of development otherwise. And she's still somewhat defined by her romance despite being tough. Like, we kind of want to see her melt in the face. Like, we kind of want to see these two characters both actually let down their barriers and fall in love. But we know she's not going to necessarily have the standard life of, settling down, getting married, having kids. Like the 1950s type life is not going to be for her. Then you have like the TV and movie version. She might not be as romance heavy, but she's just kind of the female action hero who does action hero type things. And when I was a kid, a lot of my female peers really liked these strong female characters, and I can see why. They were lacking in media before that, and suddenly we did have these strong women. I mean, I still love Princess Leia. There are certainly strong female characters that I can appreciate, but even then, I wasn't pretending to be Princess Leia. Well, unless you count that one Halloween, where I guess I kind of literally did pretend to be Princess Leia, but other than that, I usually was not drawn to these kind of characters. At that point, it seemed like women were generally doing one of two things. They were either like the healing support role, or they were the swords fighter girl. And that was like it. That was all women got to do, which was an improvement over only getting to be a damsel in distress, but was still pretty limiting. And a lot of the media I grew up with, it was pretty standard to have like a cast of like 5 guys and 1 girl. And for it to kind of be conveyed like, hey, boys, you can pick any of these characters to identify with, but girls, you get this one. But we made her strong, so here you go. So the men often got to fulfill like every other role. The woman, maybe she was the healer, now she's the swordswoman, but either way, what she doesn't get to be is like the thief and the bard and the rogue and the comic relief character and the mad scientist and the wise mentor, the shadowy semi-antagonist. They didn't get to be any of the other types of characters that you could be. They still were stuck in being either girly girl or boy girl, and that was it. What if you, like me, don't really identify with either of those things? You are just the weird nerd girl and you like the weirdos. That was me, and so I did not usually identify with female characters. Didn't like the strong female character. You know, I could probably do a whole other video simply on this topic, but let me stay focused on the strong female protagonists. And the thing about the most interesting characters is that they are often similar to the most interesting people in real life. Maybe because they know interesting things. And that's why I'm excited about the sponsor for this video, Brilliant, because maybe you'd like to become a more interesting character yourself. Brilliant is a learning app that helps you boost your knowledge on STEM topics like math, science, programming, AI, and data. Rather than liking the strong character best, I often like the smart character, and Brilliant helps you to become a better thinker and problem solver. With thousands of visual interactive lessons crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from Stanford, MIT, Caltech, Google, Microsoft, and more. As you complete each interactive lesson, you gain EXP and level up. I find it really does help me to make a game out of learning, especially when the subject matter is a little intimidating to me. I've always felt like I was bad at math, but a lot of that was the way that I learned math. Really dry, rote lessons with no sense of how they were going to apply to my real life. Brilliance courses actually focus on the most useful applications. So as you're learning, you think, oh, that's how this works in real life. To learn for free on Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/thecozycreative, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description. Brilliant's also given our viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to everything on Brilliant. Thank you, Brilliant. So, you know, the more I think about it, I have a script for this, and I think that I'm going to throw some of the script out the window and shift gears a little, because as I'm talking, I'm realizing I kind of want to do a whole other video on like the weird ladies. I want to give another shout out video to weird female characters and why we need them. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. Instead of following these notes about that, I'm going to talk about actually something that I feel kind of strongly about now that I took a minute to think about this. And one thing I really appreciate in a novel is when I really feel like it deals with the real concerns of a woman and does not reduce women to either just a stereotypical, traditional female role or give her more of the badass role. I really like it when books actually do somewhat confront the difficulties and benefits, like just what it means to be a woman in a world where we have cultural expectations of women, we have society to deal with, and no matter how we feel as women on the inside, we still have to deal with misogyny and those cultural expectations. Like, I always feel like I have to keep my house clean, and that if it's not clean, that people will think it's my fault. And meanwhile, Dade like doesn't worry about it. And I feel like part of that is just like the ingrained cultural messaging that women keep the house clean. Therefore, if someone comes to my house and it's messy, everybody's going to just look at my house and think, I'm lazy, I'm slovenly. They're not going to see him as being the problem. That's just one of the many, 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 many things that you have to deal with when you're a woman, that you start to realize that you have like this cultural conditioning. There's certain relationship dynamics that are common among men and women. And that doesn't mean that they're universal, that everyone experiences things the same way. But I find that I identify with characters more when they are in more of a gray area. They're not just physical badasses, because I'm never going to be a physical badass, and I just I don't crave stories about people that are strikingly different. I don't have like that fantasy, you know what I mean, of like being really badass even though I'm not. I like to relate more to a character, but I also don't relate to the more stereotypical old school type of female character. I want something nuanced and real. My personal feeling about the strong female character is just that I really struggle to connect with her or care about her. Even the ones that I do enjoy, like Princess Leia, it's more like, I just think Princess Leia is fun. I think Star Wars is fun. There's not really a character in Star Wars that I'm obsessed with, but I enjoy it, you know? But Princess Leia was not like the type of character that I felt like I'm gonna glom onto. And there were very, very few female characters in TV and movies growing up that I liked or identified with really at all, because a lot of them just fit into this very feminine or very tough binary. And I was always craving the ones that didn't fit into that, and there weren't many. Some of the few that I really remember liking at the time, I loved Mrs. Brisby from The Secret of Nim. She is scared and kind of like a very feminine, delicate character in a lot of ways. She's a mom. She has kids to worry about. It's kind of funny that I was like 6 years old and running around like, I'm a mom. Like, I wasn't a kid who played with dolls or wanted kids or anything. But I think what I really liked about Mrs. Brisby in the movie, I never read the book. Last time I talked about Mrs. Brisby, people were like, you gotta read the book. The book's better. Well, I don't know. I haven't read it. I'm sorry. I was so obsessed with the movie as a kid I felt no need to experience the story in another way. Maybe someday I will read the book. I like characters like that who are obviously pushed out of their comfort zone and that I identify with, because like I would be extremely nervous having to talk to the great owl and having to go into the human house and get caught in a cage and escape, and having to, you know, meet Nicodemus and rescue my kids. Like, she has to go through all kinds of stuff, and the whole time she seems kind of terrified, but she just keeps pushing onward, asking questions, figuring out what she needs to do. It was very relatable. Now, on a completely different vibe, I also loved Auntie Mame, because she was very flamboyant and fabulous and weird, very bohemian. Much later, I found out that Auntie Mame was originally a book written by a gay man, which made a lot of sense. But she was written as a woman, and she was played wonderfully by Rosalind Russell in the film. Just dramatic fun. Like, as somebody who collected vintage clothing and was into vintage clothing from the time I was a kid, and kind of aspired, like I aspire to be somebody as fabulous and wild and weird as Auntie Mame, even though I'm probably a little too shy and nervous like Mrs. Brisby. But both of these characters have qualities that I would like to have, and that feel a little more possible to me than the strong female character. So again, this is like very personal to me, and to some women, they're going to love the strong female character. And clearly some of them do, because again, those stories are very popular. So I'm not really here to knock them, because if a story or a trope resonates with a lot of people, that means that it is giving them something that they need and want. And men have their own kind of not very well developed tropes that fulfill similar things for them, I think. So I don't really have like a problem with it. I just want to see women get to branch out more and more. And that is happening. It's definitely way better than when I was a kid or a teen as far as representation of female characters. When I'm writing my own books, I often end up thinking more about the protagonists of my favorite novels when I was a kid, more so than movies and TV, because in the novels, I got to see a lot more of an interesting range of girls than I did on like Saturday morning cartoons. I've talked a lot about the Ellen Montgomery novels because she's my favorite author, and I think that Anne of Green Gables, Emily New Moon, a lot of the characters that she writes just were those kind of imaginative, sensitive, weird girls that I identified with. But since I've talked about them a lot today, I'm instead going to bring up another one of my favorites of childhood, Anastasia Krupnik. Now, Anastasia seem to live very much in the real world, whereas Prince Edward Island almost seemed like a fantasy realm. Anastasia lived in Boston, and this book just screams that it was written for 10-year-old girls who are too smart for their own good and who come from intellectual families. So we had a lot in common, and I identified with her tremendously, which is why I think that everybody, no matter what your background, everybody deserves a book that reminds you of your own weird life and your own weird family in some way. But Lois Lowry was so good at capturing just like what it was like to be the weird smart girl and like the weird fixations of childhood. There's a whole part in the book, and I did not reread it to catch up before I made this video. But I always remember that she got really obsessed with becoming Catholic and having her first communion. And having come myself from a family where my parents were raised Catholic, but I was not raised Catholic, I totally understood this compulsion of wanting to get to put on a wedding dress, basically, when you're a kid, and like look all fancy. And she fixates on this point of Catholicism without really understanding anything about the actual theology or like what she'd be getting herself into. For a long time, for a very long time really, I struggled to write female characters myself, like at all. I generally would focus on the male cast, and then I would just throw in women in there to be love interests, and it was like I didn't know how to give them a real personality. I didn't feel like I had a lot of examples for how a woman could be interesting, which is just sad to think back on, but I really didn't. And like I couldn't seem to figure it out for myself. So the women were just, they were boring, and I didn't care about them because I didn't really want to write a strong female character. I just didn't care about this type of character. So I had a lot of them. I had a lot of like tough women running around, and then I also had a lot of like healers and more feminine women. But either way, I did not really like any of them. And actually what really shifted this for me, like once and for all, because I wrote other books before The Sorcerer's Concubine, of course, that had female protagonists. I started out my career in young adult traditional publishing, and I was writing a lot about female protagonists, and I liked them. But the character where it really clicked for me was Velsa. And one of the things that took shape while I was writing Velsa's story, I had intended to write a romantic fantasy and follow kind of the tropes of the romantic fantasy genre. But as the story took place, I realized this was really more of a heroine's journey for Velsa and kind of dealing with a marriage and with the imbalance and how men and women experience the world and their relationships. Even though her case is very extreme, she's one of my race of doll people, and she was basically created to be purchased by a man. And that premise very much came from me studying the tropes of romantic fantasy, where a lot of times like you'd have forced marriages, arranged marriages, women getting kidnapped by hot aliens, often forced into a relationship with someone. And then he becomes, like the hot protector of her and is better than she hoped when she's scared at first. Like that's a very common trope. So that was where the first idea came from. But in actually grappling with this premise, I wrote Grau like he was an exceptionally good man, because he'd kind of have to be for the story to work like as a romance. Their power imbalance is so extreme that Grau has to be a good guy with a good heart. And yet, I did not shirk away from the very real tensions of their situation. And they have some arguments, and like also times when she really resents him. Not so much for who he is. What she really is resenting more than anything is the society that they live in. And that is something that I just felt like I identify with sometimes, because I can objectively acknowledge that it is not my fault if the house is messy any more than it's Dade's fault. I shouldn't put that on myself, that I, the woman, must keep the house clean to maintain my womanly reputation. And I shouldn't get mad at him either, because that's a societal thing that's in my head. If we don't care if our house is messy, well, you know, I don't want it to be like completely gross if somebody comes over, but I also don't necessarily want to waste an entire day making sure it's spotless just because we're having a friend drop by. And yet my response is often to feel really resentful at him and then to spend my entire day cleaning the house. And that is because of society as a whole. And that's kind of a me problem, but it's also kind of a societal problem because what I'm feeling is real. It is a real expectation that has been like passed down to me by my female ancestors and by just messages from society as a whole bombarded on me since I was a kid that women clean the house. And if the house is not clean, it is the woman's fault and she is a failure. Men don't get those messages to the same degree. So Velsa deals with some kind of similar feelings of resentment at the society that she lives in that does not treat her equally or fairly. And sometimes she takes it out personally on Grau. And sometimes he does deserve for her to be resentful of him personally. He's not perfect. He's a good man. He's not a perfect man. Sometimes he too goes along with society rather than her. And I think they both have extremely valid reasons for acting the way that they do, even when they're clashing with each other. I like them both as characters, and I absolutely see their positions, why they make the decisions that they do, even when they hurt one another. But across the book, Velsa also, despite not being like, she's not like a super badass. She does have some telepathic ability, but she's not like super powered or anything. Like, she kind of just has enough to get by and survive in this cruel world and get herself out of some scrapes. She's slowly getting better at what she does, but it doesn't come super easily to her. She doesn't have some amazing training montage where she emerges a badass or anything like that. Her strength is slowly gained and hard fought. And all along the way, despite her fear, despite the disadvantages, despite her own moments of weakness and failure and anger, she gets herself to a better place. She becomes stronger. She has a mixture of, I would say, masculine and feminine qualities. There are aspects of her feminine self that she herself loves and values. And there are other ways in which she resents how she is being hemmed in by society. And all of that, as I was writing her, I just ended up loving Velsa. And I didn't expect how much of my own experience would end up being poured onto the page of a woman with a very different life from mine. How much I would relate to her. And how much of her story deals directly with the experience of being a woman, at least from my point of view. I mean, you know, readers can interpret these things however they want, but I have had some good feedback that seems like some people did get that out of her. And the funny thing about that, after I wrote Velsa and I loved her so much, I had no problem writing female characters and loving them a lot after that. It was like somehow she really broke the dam for me, and I was able to really throw myself into writing female characters forever after. And since then, I've written a lot of female characters that I love writing, and a lot of them have dealt with some aspects of being a woman in different, I would say, in our world, except they live in another world. And in fact, this world has different cultures that have some different expectations sometimes. So it's not always the same. But in The Broken Queen, I dealt a lot with the decision to have children or not, to really want children or to really not want children, and expectations of having children. That ended up being a big theme in that series. I haven't written an actual novel about Vera Vissa yet, but her story in a lot of ways is kind of having to balance nurturing and supporting your male partner without losing yourself in the process, and how that can be difficult because many women have a male partner that they really want to support and have a reason to want to support, but at the same time, you don't want to give up your whole self. Women entering male spaces, that was kind of Kessley's story. Kessley is a side character in Velsa's story, but I do want to write about her eventually. She's probably one of the characters that gets closer to being the strong female character, but she kind of copes with entering male spaces by being a little bit more like of a fun, almost comic relief character, kind of joking around, and that like, okay, I'll be one of the boys, I'll like joke around. She also has a lot of brothers, so she's like that kind of girl. Not strong as much in the sense of being a warrior, although she is a powerful sorceress, but like taking on that sort of side of masculinity in order to sort of fit in male spaces. And not all women will want to make those themes a central part of their story, although they are very common. A lot of the strong female characters, as I said, came from a sort of direct response to wanting to rebel against traditional femininity. So a lot of them are certainly having a direct conversation with the role of women in society, whether or not that appears on the page. But I think what makes a lot of these characters boring, not just for me, but for a lot of other people, is that a lot of them sidestep this entirely. It's not that every female character has to be a discussion on what it means to be a woman, but it can also become very bland when every female character just feels like a girl boss who can fight like a man, hold her own against a man, who does have like a training montage and becomes like, she's like one of the world's most powerful assassins at the age of 18, and she easily slides into an incredibly hot relationship with a really hot man, and that's about all she does. The challenges that she faces feel very simple and contrived, whereas in a lot of ways it feels like she gets everything she wants and then some, and never has to struggle in any meaningful way with worrying about whether her house is clean, or whether or not she wants children, or how to navigate male-dominated spaces when she's not having a sexually charged verbal sparring match. All in all, like I said, I have no problems with there being the strong female character trope floating around out there. I think she definitely has a place in storytelling, and some women are like that in real life. I just really want to see a variety of characters, and I hope to see depth in the writing of all of them, whether they are the strong female character, girls who do like to knit and embroider, and then I just want to see a wide variety. I want to see women who are hilarious and weird and conniving and all kinds of things. So I'm going to plan a video on that, and I would love to know your thoughts on strong female characters. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you love them with a caveat that you just don't like this certain type? Or is there a different type of female character that you would love to see more of? You know, all that, you know what to do. Drop a comment. If you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove, and I'm a fantasy author. I talk about the creative life in general and the writing life in particular, so if that sounds good to you, stick around. I want to once again thank Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check them out at brilliant.org/thecozycreative if you'd like more from me. I also offer members 2 bonus videos a month voted on by you guys. They are accessible via my YouTube memberships, Patreon, or Substack. And if you'd like to read any of my books, there's a link in the description. My Hidden Lands books are the ones that are nearest and dearest to my heart, and the ones I always recommend first. But my free book of the month is one of my books I wrote to market, The Glass Princess. It's rather steamy, but I really liked the protagonist in this. She is one of my favorite tropes, the somewhat spoiled princess who slowly becomes stronger and more humbled throughout various troubles and dangers that she faces, and also has some of my favorite world building I've ever done outside of the Hidden Lands books. And if you'd like to catch my lives, I post every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I'd love to see you there. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. Bye!